All right, so I will call the February 20th Newcastle Planning Board meeting to order. The time is 6:34. Did I say that right? February 20th, 2025. I didn't say 2024. I'm still saying 2024. Okay, so review of minutes from our January 16th, 2025 Planning Board meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Moved and seconded by Kevin. Thank you.
Scott,
Any
Kevin?
comments, corrections,
No.
questions? None, seeing none, all in favor? You were not here, so that passes 3-0.
3-0 and one
abstention.
abstention.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is to hold a public hearing. We have two things for the public hearing. Proposed core zoning code amendments. One is for minimum unit size that's to comply with LD 2003. And the other one is the changes we've been proposing for the additional structures. So at this time, I will open the public hearing for those two proposed amendments. Do we have any comments from the one member of the public we have with us? Yeah, okay.
You don't have to put that on the record.
It's on the record now. I mean,
I fully understand the
sure.
reason for them both, yeah.
I think these, they're pretty simple, I guess, for the benefit of the viewers who may watch or tune in later. Michael, could you just give us a real short overview of what these two things are, since we will be voting on them at some point if approved.
Right. So the first one is the minimum unit size, which we are getting rid of throughout the code. It is something that we added in when we did the last round of amendments, where we were trying to come into compliance with the state's LD 2003 law. And then they came back and said, no, that does not, that can run afoul of basically allowing the ADUs, which we don't do ADUs. So basically, we're not gonna have a minimum unit size. And then
For the record about that, I just want to say I feel picked on
be from by the state.
by the state.
Well,
It's a very nitpicky little thing, thank you. And
we're one of the few towns that have
we're one of the only ones that has a true form-based code. And so I feel like they put us under a microscope, which is, I don't feel like they're doing that to the 400 other municipalities in the state.
Probably not. I like to think it's out of curiosity and look at this shiny new thing, but it may also, who knows why. But either way,
Just commenting.
yes, that they did point that out, and then but that's pretty straightforward. We're just striking the minimum residential unit sizes, and then the other one is additional structures, which I got a call today from somebody, and I just wanted to make it clear that additional structures you can't put dwelling units in. They're like chicken coops and sheds and things like that. So these two changes are not related at all. And the additional structures is it was kind of spurred by Rob Blood and the it's not Newcastle Marine anymore, but where that was in the fabrication district. One of the things was he wanted to be able to have store boats in temporary in additional structures, but he couldn't get them big enough in the fabrication. And we had the conversation, and everybody seemed to think that that was a use that we wanted to accommodate. And so then as we were going through there's also just some other language to clean it up. Hopefully make it more clear. And I will just say, for the marina dry storage use, which is the way that we kind of accommodated the marine, the boat storage, was that we allowed marina dry storage to have additional structures that are up to 1,200 square feet in area. And we also made sure that they have to be removed once, if that use terminates, if and when that use terminates. So it's not just for fabrication, it's also, I think, it's in any of the districts where marina dry storage is a allowable use, which if you're in like neighborhood residential, I don't think you have to worry about it. But fabrication, maybe rural highway.
Mhm.
So, but that's it. Those are the two buckets that these changes are falling into.
Any other comments or thoughts from the board? If not, we'll entertain a motion to accept the amendments and forward them on, or recommend that they be forwarded by the select board for inclusion on the next available warrant. Do we have a motion? Moved by Kevin.
Second.
Seconded by Scott. Thank you. Any other discussions, comments, thoughts about that? No? All in favor? That passes forward. Thank you. So no old business, but new business. I was a little bit confused about this one. What is this we're looking at?
This is Kevin, the CEO, got an application for a temporary structure. And in it, in the code, they're allowed, I think it's 3 months. They're allowed, the CEO can basically approve a temporary structure for up to 3 months. It can be allowed for longer if with planning board approval. And so the conversation that I had with Kevin was, and I'm not sure what the process exactly is, what Kevin and I were hoping was that we could get the planning board to take a vote and say, yes, this temporary structure may be allowed for, let's see what it says on here. It's not indefinitely. Just this 3 months plus extension. Oh, for a year. He wants to have it for a year. And if you want, I'm happy to go through and explain it is, well, I guess what I included in your packet was this like a plastic Quonset hut kind of thing that he's putting over, I believe it's material for the building that was just approved, that originally was approved for Chase Marine, that then he acquired and is going to build and use for his use. He wants to cover that. It is already covered under the 3-month version of this. We'd like to keep that structure up for a year. That is what I'm bringing to you.
So this is a little bit of an odd one because it's not an application we're reviewing.
Right. It's basically just the time frame of it.
So let's
Is this thing really considered a true structure, a shelter project? I mean, we use them for all kinds of things. Sometimes we go park the car in it. We use one for a short time for a woodshed.
Yeah. Let's go read temporary structures. Everyone has the code up on page 50. How big is it?
10 by 28 feet.
10 foot 10 inches by 20 and about 10 feet tall. And it's
All right, so the purpose here of temporary structures is to provide standards for the short-term deployment of the structure to shelter people, products, equipment, or animals from elements. Applicability applies to any structure not classified as a primary, accessory, or additional structure. It is temporary in nature, including but not limited to tents, carports, storage containers, and moving equipment. So my read on that is it fits the definition. Under general C, general 2A, the planning board may grant an extension of up to 1 year based on demonstrated need. How do we evaluate that?
Right. I mean, if I was an applicant, I would come and be like, I need it. I have things I want to put in it under it to protect it from the elements. I don't know.
When does this 3 months run out?
Let's see, this was issued. Copy of the permit.
12/19. The 3.
Yes, correct. December 19th.
It's got
They're only 2 months in.
March
it's
13th.
got 1 more month. Got 4 more weeks.
Next planning meeting's on the 20th, I think.
1 day past its expiration.
So this is supposed to be used for lumber that he is going to be building a structure out of? Is that what? Really doesn't.
Shelter
Understand.
logic, shelter, wind and snow rated storage shed. Will be located in the grass near the future of the property. Yeah, basically. Doesn't really say, well, it says need cover, oh, this says need cover. I think it just notes, but it has to come to the planning board. Application. I guess the first thing is does this seem like the appropriate way for this process to play out? That the code enforcement officer can issue the permit up to 3 months, and then the planning board, should it be a separate permit, or can the planning board basically say, great, this is fine, and the time limit can be extended? That's what I wasn't sure, is like, do we need to hold an application for the planning board, or planning board may grant that extension, which seems like not a whole new permit, it's just an extension of the existing permit.
I think it would be helpful, to me anyway, it would be helpful if he said what he was gonna use it for, because if he's truly gonna use it to store building material to build a building, you would think by next fall, the goal would be to have that building up, and then this would be able to come down, but
Right.
that would all be. I mean, then you could see an end to the use of the building.
Yeah.
If you knew exactly what it was gonna be used for, and the building was gonna be built over the summer. But this doesn't say any of that, so.
No.
So in other words, if the request for an extension said, this extension, we plan and give a date, and say by whatever, August 30th, we will not need it anymore.
Well, in here, the request is for basically a 9-month extension. But I think, to Wanda's point, it's why 9 months rather than 6 months or 3 months.
Because if it's a full year, then you're into December, and I would think by that point.
Yeah, it would be. And I'm not the applicant, so this is not, I'm just thinking, like, it may be that he was like, yeah, by the fall it should be done, but let's just round it to a year.
It says you can go to a year, let's just.
Right.
I appreciate the idea that at each one of these little forks in the road, that you want to make a decision that is efficient and streamlined for the future. So whatever is efficient and streamlined for the future.
Yeah, and I mean. I don't object necessarily to any of this. I would like a little bit more information.
Well, I think too, because if it truly is, you give him a year, and then it's like next December, he's gonna take it down, well, by then, if we have all ice and snow,
Not gonna take.
that is not ideal to take shelter like this down.
Right. Right. Well, my thinking on that is that it would be up to the applicant to make sure that it's taken down by December 12th.
Yeah.
After that, it'd be a violation. I don't know how aggressive the town code enforcement want to be with
Yeah.
something like that. But
I'm not so worried about that, because once we do whatever we're gonna do, it's up to the CEO.
Mhm.
So, and we don't tell the CEO what to do. I'm thinking a little bit more, I think like Scott is, which is very vague in the code. Like how we evaluate, there's no criteria.
Yeah.
Which is fine, it's a minor thing, but. What if it wasn't?
I think that's absolutely right. Is the next time something comes up, can we apply the same?
And we just kind of go, yes, no, I mean, it seems a little slapdash, I don't like that. I think at the moment, my inclination and suggestion would be that, yes, our next meeting is one day after his 3 months expires. But he's still got another month, and we're not gonna enforce on him for a day. I think what I'd like to do is maybe say, we ask you and the CEO to flesh out a more appropriate process for us to evaluate demonstrated need.
Decision, okay, yeah, just kind of decision criteria.
Mhm.
Because what I'm thinking is, what it says here is demonstrated need, which it might,
I just don't like the subjective nature of that.
yeah, well, which is,
I just don't like it.
yeah, because it is very.
So we've got a month, so I'm not trying to make it harder for the applicant, but I would say if we extended it a month
Mhm.
to our next planning board meeting, we asked the applicant to provide some more details about the use. We asked you and the CEO to craft metrics or some way for us to evaluate this. We can come back to it. We'd set a good precedent for the future.
Yeah.
And then I think it'd be handled a little bit less subjectively than just saying, oh yeah, fine, go ahead. Which I just don't like doing.
Yeah, well, I imagine what I'm just thinking is, does the need outweigh any impacts from this? And if we can kind of flesh that out so that that's something the board can essentially say, like, because what I'm imagining here in the fabrication district, it might be like, yeah, okay, you want to put up a temporary structure, it's not going to have a negative impact on, but in a different district, it may be, you want to put up a temporary structure for in 6 months, that's not, it'll be more noticeable, so that depending on the situation, the need should follow it up, follow the impact up.
Yeah, the impact, and then, I mean, there's a lot of other things to consider. I'm thinking like, what if it was? The temporary structures are allowed in any district.
Mhm. Right.
Any district. So let's envision a very large one of those carports designed for a motorhome. 45-foot motorhome. And let's imagine that it was in downtown. I think we'd have a little bit more of a conversation about the appropriateness of that. Instead of just saying, yeah, go for it for a year.
Yeah. And now I'm just thinking, like, kind of devil's advocate. What could the planning board, like right now, demonstrated need? Like, well, I need it because I need, kind of hard for the planning board to be like, no. Because they can be like, well, but I demonstrated the need, how do you look back? So I think it kind of needs both. It needs to put the planning board in a situation where, like, either they have to say yes or they have to say no, or pretty close to it.
I would appreciate some more of that.
I think the need plays a big part in it, because if you're gonna pack your motorhome in it, then most likely you're gonna need that more than a year. You're not gonna just do that for one season. Now, if he's truly gonna put building material that he's gonna build a building with, then you can see a little bit more that truly, at the end of that, he could take that down and we don't need that anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But without knowing really what he's gonna do with it, I think that, to me, plays a big piece.
Well,
in it.
yeah, and for archival purposes, we have these permits, they should be clear
Very cool.
about what it is, the use is, how long, etc. So I don't think it's unreasonable. I know it's delaying it a little bit, but I think there's good reason to say, let's shove it off a month. Ask the applicant for just a little bit more information for the posterity and review. Ask you guys to craft us some things to consider, guardrails, and then we'll come back. What do you all think?
And I can't imagine who's putting that thing up.
It's already up.
Oh, it's already
yeah.
up.
Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
up.
I'm sort of curious why it has to be a structure and not a giant tarp. I mean, if it's a tarp, it doesn't fall into anybody's.
Yeah, maybe the building materials are just too tall for a tarp or something. I don't know.
Or you can
No idea.
organize them better than just being under the tarp.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you're pulling stuff out of there, pull the tarp off.
And every time it
Very
snows,
snow.
you gotta shovel it off. And, you
Yeah, I
know.
mean, the one comment, besides the use, which I completely agree with, the one comment I had about the application in general was just. Whenever, no matter what kind of structure it is, we do require. To know where on the lot it's gonna be. So when it says, will be located in the grass near the entrance of property.
Where is that?
Where is that?
Yeah, I think,
Give me just a little sketch of the property and draw, it doesn't have to be crazy.
yeah,
It just needs to be
The X on the
drawn
map?
so that it goes with the application.
so we can locate.
So we can
yeah.
locate it.
And so that you could also determine that it is either in the correct spot or not in the correct spot.
Correct. Or,
Not to beat anybody over the head with it.
a year
but
from now, it's not a question of, was this the temporary structure we're talking about, or is that the temporary structure? You know what I mean? Like.
Mhm. Yep. Yes.
Again, I don't want to be overly burdensome. But I think that.
But we have to do our due diligence.
We have to, yeah, that's our job, and when there's these things that aren't perfectly clear, I think pausing for a second to think about it is appropriate.
Yeah, the only other thing that I'm wondering is, I'm just looking at additional structures. Yeah, in even just the way that it is now with fabrication. The CEO could essentially allow a 300 square foot structure. It would need to be screened is the difference in fabrication,
Mhm.
and that would just be permanent.
Yep.
Well, or not temporary.
Right,
So I think that my guess is that temporary structures are meant to be a lighter, even more streamlined, or lighter lift than additional structures.
but that shouldn't introduce. A degree of subjectivity that I'm uncomfortable with
Yeah,
in the
no,
review.
I want to make sure that we keep everything kind of like, we understand how it all relates.
Yeah.
That's
With
my
you.
So, okay, I will discuss this with Kevin and come back with some,
It doesn't have to be
Metrics
much,
and-
I just think
yeah,
a little bit of
some definition.
definitions or guidelines. About what that means. I don't want to be, again, I don't want to be harsh, I'm teeing up for a future.
So do you think this is somebody who needs an additional whatever month or whatever? Is that appropriate for the planning board?
That is also a good question.
I mean,
That's a good question.
4 months rather than 3.
I'm just saying that when I think of streamlining, I think maybe this isn't something that we deal with because you set something in place. And then beyond some other amount of time, yeah. But
I think that, I think the reason it was here is kind of. Where the backstop on. The CEO just. Every 3 months, giving another one, giving another one,
Okay.
giving another one. But I agree with you, maybe 3 months isn't appropriate, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it goes. But I think temporary structures as a component of the code is important. To regulate, so I don't think that they should be jettisoned entirely. I think there's a need, even if it's a light touch, there needs to be, and I, 100% applaud the applicant for coming forward, understanding that it was necessary to put in a permit, something that most people, I think, would just say,
Might not even think it,
just put it up. So kudos. Again, not trying to rake Rob over the coal, trying to do what's best for the town here. We've got time. He's got.
but I think Scott has a good point too, that maybe, maybe it could be like 1 or 2 extensions can be done by. And then only after that, does it come to the hard stop of the planning board to
could,
say yay or nay.
Well, why don't you discuss that with Kevin and see if you have any recommendations and
That
propose a
sounds
couple
sort of
changes.
reasonable.
Yeah.
So then
Package
we
those
might
up.
leave it up for a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
Well, that would be ordinance amendment, which that was fine.
But yeah, we could put it in, package it with the next round.
Yeah, right.
That's fine. It's not a big thing.
because really 3 months isn't a long time, especially in Maine.
No, I know, and
Weather
I'm thinking
changes.
like, it's,
You put something. in 3
obviously,
months,
when
so-
this was written, everyone was thinking, well, this is obviously only gonna be during summer.
Right.
No one ever really thought like, well, it might span fall into winter and then
Yeah.
like, no one's taking down temporary structures in February.
Not usually.
No one's putting up temporary structures in February. Well, maybe you are.
And maybe they're
Maybe
having a hard
first.
time finding a contract.
Okay, all right, so we all good with that? I don't think we need to take any action on that.
No, I just got some direction from you all, so I'll bring it back at the next meeting and
All right. That's good, thank you. All right, so other business, discussion of potential core zoning code amendments. Excuse me, number 1, building groups. Specifically, the requirement for 500 feet between curb cuts. You wanna,
this was requested by a resident who would like to utilize, I believe, it's not connected farm, it's small rural compound, would like to utilize the small rural compound building group and was going through and is trying to figure out how to make it work. And there were a couple things that I think might need to be possibly need to be tweaked. And so the first thing I wanted to do was to come to the planning board and see if those would be to work on the code. There were standards that, yes, there was a reason for this 500 feet between curb cuts when only 250 feet is required. But the larger effort here that I'm trying to move towards is we haven't had anybody come in to use a building group yet, and I want to make sure that they work and that they're attractive and that people don't just ignore it and it's not just doesn't just get ignored. So I guess that is specifically the 500 feet between curb cuts. What was the reason for that? Or is that intentional? And then I'd like to go through this, or if the planning board wants to go through and be like, oh, something in here doesn't quite fit. And let's make sure that it's ready for prime time.
Mhm. So, I mean, I can speak a little bit to the sort of intent behind some of the metrics around building groups. The concept of building groups is really trying to think how many problems we were trying to solve at once. At least 2. The first one was really 3 areas. The first one is how to encourage and allow traditional New England patterns of development, specifically in rural areas that are very, very, very common, but are difficult to permit using the standard permitting model. And so building types alone wasn't enough to get to the point where, everybody's heard maybe you haven't, but the phrase big house, little house, back house, barn. It's a book written about it, many books written about it. Very common style pattern of development. Farms and doing, and if you look around, they're every. And that is that specific arrangement of things, but other arrangements of building groups. That's not really possible when you're only allowed one primary building and one detached accessory building on a lot. And so the idea was, how do we get that all together? Second one was the second reason for building groups was to allow the potential for more uses in rural. Traditionally, rural lands have been locked to very, very few uses. Essentially, residential dwelling units and farming. Basically it. And what we heard overwhelmingly when we did all of our meetings and everything was that people in rural areas really wanted to be able to make best use of their land,
But keep it looking rural.
but keep it looking rural. So this was the compromise, right? This is how to like split the knife edge. How do you allow more uses that don't lead to rural lands slowly being built up into more suburban areas, right? That's the name of the game, right? Rural lands get eaten by suburbia all the time. And so that leads to the third point, which was using building groups was an attempt at providing a alternative pattern of development to traditional subdivisions.
It was, is this, a little bit of like cluster zoning kind of in here where you're allowing more
Yeah, a little bit.
units?
I hate
when you-
cluster zoning or cluster development.
Well, it doesn't usually ever turn out to be anything besides subdivision, suburban-y, but
I think the 500-foot curb cut came to be so that you didn't have a driveway every 100 feet. Because that's what does not keep rural.
Yeah.
That's what makes it look very, so if you kept longer spaces between driveways, but it allowed people to have the road, but then go into the back and build up their compound. That's my understanding of sort of why.
Yeah, absolutely. And
consolidate driveways kind of, is that?
well, we allowed for shared driveways, for sure.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it is weird. I completely will admit that it is weird to say, based on what your neighbor's doing, you may or may not be allowed to do this because you're within 500 feet.
Right.
That's a weird thing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not very clean because it'd be cleaner if the rules were just what you can do on this parcel and just what you can do on this parcel and what you can do on this parcel. But the attempt here is exactly what Wanda is alluding to here, which is like, if you allow small rural compound every 5 acres or 250 feet along the existing private or public road, because of the more intensity of the development that's allowed within a small or a large rural compound, you very quickly move that district or that area out of rural.
Mhm.
It very quickly becomes suburban.
Mhm.
So the 500 feet is, well, it doesn't matter if it's on this side of the road or that side of the road, it's got to be 500 feet so that you don't end up with a small rural compound, small rural compound, small rural compound. We do want people to use this,
Mhm.
but we don't want people to abuse this.
Right. Yeah, no, makes sense.
And so I think if we could find a more amiable way or creative way of crafting a set of standards that accomplishes the same goal. It doesn't have to be like this necessarily. But at the time, I think that's really what we were pushing for was we really don't want, the way that we always said it is, we want rural to stay rural.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important goal.
And the trade-off of the uses, if you look at the use table for rural, is a very unique use table.
Yeah.
Right? So that's on page 13. All of those ones with the circle with a star in it, those are what are allowed by having a building group.
Mhm.
All of them.
Yeah.
And
Which I think is an intelligent way to try and rein in some of the sprawl is.
it is, but you know, so I mean, even at 500 feet, my
Wow.
personal feeling and argument is that if somebody had, 50 acres and you are allowed to build a medium-sized office that's just office use, not mixed use, just medium-sized office building, which I think is up to 50 units or something. I can't remember in the definition. But it's a large building. If you could do that even 500 feet along a rural road, you no longer have rural.
Yeah.
End of story.
That's a suburban office park.
That is a suburban office.
I mean, like that 500 feet is
Nothing.
probably, yeah. I'm sure there are office parks that go well beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, the Gardner Industrial Park has far more than 500 feet, but
Especially if you just fill it all with parking, that 500 feet, they won't go very far.
and that's just one thing. So I mean, you pick any of the uses that are listed under expanded use permit
Mhm.
in that district and envision this and this and this and this. Yes, it does allow for those uses, but I'm definitely not in favor of shrinking.
Yeah.
The distance standard.
Does the standard designate that the curb cut is for something separate, like a separate building?
The reason I'm thinking that is I'm thinking, what about somebody that wants a driveway that has two entrances? Semester.
Yeah.
That's two curb cuts.
It is. That is correct. Yeah. And I think that style is only allowed in of driveway. It's only allowed, I think, in rural, D2 and maybe D3, but they're not allowed in any of the others.
And it also would depend on, it's a state road, but all separate, like state's got to say,
Correct,
yeah, for each cut. Well, one of the other things, and I wasn't sure if resident might be here to ask any specific questions, but I also noticed for large rural compound, there's single unit residential, multi-unit residential, where we really don't make that distinction anymore. So not that we couldn't necessarily with these building groups, as long as we're allowing essentially 3 dwelling units and not putting a restriction that would run afoul like we were trying to address with that amendment for minimum unit size. There's no reason we couldn't say, have a single unit residential building that's permitted as part of a larger group, but it only exists for building groups, so that
Yeah.
might be something to consider.
You're in the process of thinking about building types.
I am.
I don't think we should propose any changes until we flesh that out.
No, and I like to think out loud.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I just want to mention that Michelle has volunteered and is taking on doing the meeting minutes. And I apologize to her because I already, at least when I was doing them, it was like, I would try to be quiet because I had to make it so. But I also just would like, your feedback, because I want to know, does this seem like an issue to you, or do you not care about it? It's working, or is there a reason? And it seems like the curb cut not a big issue. The building types, could be cleaned up, but not on their own,
I think it should be holistic
which
throughout the
what I like to do.
Yeah.
So,
um.
okay. Well, if
Is
you
there
do-
are there other aspects to, I wish people were more interested in building groups because they're very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, a large rural compound, if you've got 10 acres, you meet the dimensional standards, you can have up to 7 units. That's huge. Huge. LD 2003 would only allow you to have maximum of 4.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're not on sewer and you're not in a growth area,
You
2,
wouldn't be.
you'd be basically allowed 2, I think.
Well,
If you're,
no, you'd at least be allowed 3.
well, I think if you're in a growth area or you're on sewer and water, that gets you a 3rd. And then if you're in both, you would get a 4th, I think, but I don't.
Yeah. Well,
Here in Newcastle, it's kind of a moot point because
it is, but 7's a lot.
yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, seven units. You can do a lot with that.
As long as you got the septic for it.
Yeah.
So, well, if you all do go through building groups and find anything that's, an issue, would love to hear it. I think it's an interesting tool to try and make attractive to develop.
I agree.
On a slightly separate, but just because we're kind of on this topic, because I know this is trying to create a process that's less painful than traditional subdivision and has better results than traditional subdivision. It occurs to me that master planning, the option for master plan application is kind of a planned unit or kind of a thorough subdivision. And that there also could be, so that might be like subdivision heavy, and then there could also be a version of subdivision light that is for applicants who are coming in and basically saying, I don't want to build any buildings. I just want to, I've got a lot here and I want to cut it into 4 pieces. And that's it. I'm not creating any new frontage. It's just, I want to create some lots that I can sell, and that's it. Because there's so many standards under subdivision that are just then not applicable.
Yeah.
Or kind of like, and the questions that I get from people is like, well, how do I prove that I'm not going to impact the phosphorus levels of the Great Lake? And it's like, that doesn't apply here. So I figured that might be an option, and there also really should be some option for like apartment buildings, basically, which we've discussed. And I think that because right now you create a building that has more than three or more units in it, subdivision.
Well, we've known that we have to bring that back
And yes,
to the voters. It was unfortunately not really well understood the last time we proposed those changes.
right.
And we should probably do that as a separate.
I started kind of trying to figure out if there's a cleaner, easier way.
Yeah.
To deal with subdivision.
Yeah.
Because it is a one size fits all. And then today I just got a memo that the state is putting together a working group to try and
Fix subdivision?
fix,
Can I volunteer?
Yeah, I think
Got a
so.
lot to say.
Right now, I think the bill is just put together a working group to suggest fixes to subdivision.
So it's years out.
Yeah,
Yes.
20 years at least.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But
We can fix it on our own and then show them how we did it.
yeah, I think that we might be a little bit faster, but it just so happens that they also.
They have nothing else.
All right.
But I just thought those, not that I'm trying to create more things to do, but that the one size fits all with the way the state has subdivisions is kind of too much.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, at some point, bring that in, but I'm still working on quite a bit of this, and some point I will bring it to you.
It all ties together. And it all impacts everything.
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, are we good with that then? On to B, planning board work plan for 2025.
You know, I think I just left that on there.
That was from last, I
the
wonder.
last, yeah.
Great, I
'Cause
think
we-
we're clear on, we
yeah.
have that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so do we have any public comments on any topic?
I actually was gonna just make one comment about the whole issue, the temporary buildings and 3 month limit and the extension.
Yeah.
There's another good reason to practice due diligence with that is, what if another resident or other residents come along and complain to the office saying, well, this thing is still up here, it's blocking my view of the truth, why is it still here?
Right.
You have a document that justifies
Yep.
the extension, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's just one thought that crossed my mind.
No,
You wanna cover that base, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, good applications and good documentation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you. All right. Planners report, you got anything?
I think we've I think I've gotten a lot of the application forms together and we kind of are pretty well rolled out a process where you are always working towards one of two permits, use permit, building permit. That is implemented.
Okay.
That worked with Rob Blood when he created his virtual lot. He was able to get a building permit basically for the building and a use permit for the new use there. And we also applied it to, or it works, and we've applied it to short-term rentals. So the tourist rental is a use in the use table, so people can come now and say, I want to do a short-term rental. And the code requires that you register every year. So first time you do it, you have to get a use permit to allow that use there, which CEO can do. I think in every district that they're allowed. And then every year you just have to fill out that form, re-register it. But now that that's all, that structure is there, it kind of fit right in. And
How's it working with sort of the fringe cases of subdivision, shoreland, building groups?
so it hasn't come up to be an issue yet. Where I do think it may be an issue is one of the things we put on there was if you're short-term renting an entire dwelling unit, so if you've got like a 3-unit house and you subdivision, you short-term rent one of them, each one really should have its own E911 address, each unit. So I did put a note on there that basically says, if you don't have a separate address for this, get one. And it's not like it's difficult or doesn't cost anything to get an address. It just tell us this. I wouldn't be surprised if that does trigger, like, how many units are here? When did you do this? Oh, that's a subdivision issue. It really shouldn't be, because unless they're already existing, unless it's 3 within 5 years, that whole thing.
Yeah.
There's no reason that it shouldn't work. It should fit with shoreland subdivision, everything else. It should already fit in there.
Yeah.
If you're creating the unit, all that will get addressed when you create the unit in the first place, and then whether or not you short-term rent it is kind of an after the fact thing.
You gotta fix that subdivision.
Subdivision is
Even if we could just remove that one thing,
the number of
the
units.
number of units do not count towards subdivision.
Mhm.
Even if we could just propose that one small change. And then work on the rest later.
I think
So,
I'm sure we can, because I just was rereading the statute, and you don't have to, you can exempt that, multifamily buildings from subdivision, paraphrasing, as long as the project gets reviewed under site plan,
so we're covered.
which I
We
think
do.
that
We do.
this ordinance
Always.
is
I know.
would count as site.
We don't have a standard site plan ordinance the way but our whole thing is site plan,
Right.
so we're good.
Yeah. I think so.
That that leads me to my next question. We're gonna hold the special town meeting in March
Yes, for the two
for
amendments
these
that
two
are-
things that we just had a public hearing about, right?
Mhm.
What is next? And is that when? That'll be annual town meeting.
The annual town meeting will be the next town meeting after March. The conversation I had with Kevin was to not try and bite anything off for the annual town meeting and rather focus on the fall town meeting, which there's kind of tentatively scheduled a special town or town meeting once a quarter until get all of the things done that select board wants to get done.
Which will be never.
Yeah,
but
well,
yes.
But what I would like to do is that it's kind of focus in maybe some of the larger land use changes for a fall meeting anyway, even if we're not going to have a winter or spring one, rather than trying to lump it in with the budget and everything else that's at town meeting, because it just is a lot. You can kind of say, that's where the bigger stuff.
So we don't want to propose any land use changes for annual town meeting?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. My thinking was some of this stuff needs work, and I'd rather get that done and put something well considered forward in the fall. But like, if you want to try and bite off the multifamily exemption from subdivision, I don't see
Well, that's a simple change that would make a huge difference.
that is a pretty simple.
I don't know how you all feel, but as long as we have open town meeting, my opinion is that is our opportunity. That's the big show.
Do it there.
Well, and to not do, I understand the budget takes a long time. I understand the more we put on that warrant, the longer we're all sitting in the gym or in the cafeteria of the school. However, it's the show.
Mhm.
We only get that once a year.
Yeah.
So
So is there a way that, is there a way you can rate the proposal, whatever it is? Either based on whatever controversy it might stir, or or the ramification to the larger community where the whole town should hear about this thing.
yeah,
But, I sat through an awful lot of those town meetings when I was at the hospital, and if it's a small item.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're waiting on them to approve the school budget or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I just toss that out. I don't know if there's a way you can rate that.
so you're arguing the other side.
Sort of.
Okay.
I'm trying to say if the ramifications, it seems to me if the ramifications rise to the town meeting level,
Mhm.
then that's where it belongs.
Hmm.
But who would judge that?
We would, if it's horizontal code related. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it is, however. We don't tend to get subdivision applications in the winter.
And I imagine they're gonna come. They're gonna start coming soon.
I think so.
I got a budget there, Scott.
And so it's like, I'd rather have that on the books sooner rather than later, even if it's a small change.
And that one I think isn't gonna take hours and hours and hours to craft. That should be.
And it shouldn't be a huge conversation at town meeting. It really should. If we keep it very narrow, very focused, like this is all we're doing.
Mhm.
This one little thing. Do you agree or not? And not lump it in with other major changes, it might be an easy thing to get through. Again. My personal inclination is that's the show.
Good.
But I hear what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I think, ethically, any chance you get to put what we do in the front of the broader community is probably a good thing for education purposes. Sure.
No, I know. And I really do appreciate that, that we're doing quarterly special town meetings, but it's not the same draw. It's not as well known or established. And it tends to be people who have specific interest
Mm.
in the topics presented. Whereas the annual town meeting, people generally come out,
Not many,
not many,
not many.
but not everyone's there with a special interest in what's being talked about, you know what I mean? It's like, well, I wanna know about the budget, or I wanna, you know, they might have a couple of things. So, that's all. So, the select board may not agree with that.
Well, I will work on at least the multifamily removal from subdivision. Still, it's gonna have to go through regular review.
But we'd have time for regular review and public hearing on that before.
No, I'm just saying, like, I will work on getting that.
Yeah.
That issue removed from subdivision review and. Bring it to you next time,
Okay. I mean,
or maybe it's not next time, but
it'd be a huge benefit to anybody actually considering doing, you know, multi-unit. Anything. That you don't have to go through subdivision, I mean, it's like,
yeah, just 3 or more units, and
right,
now with LD 2003, it's a lot easier to do 3 or more units,
right,
or even just 3,
right.
so.
But I just, the idea that in Newcastle, you have to, if you're gonna do 3 units, a triplex. You have to go through subdivision.
Yeah.
That's just silly.
It is.
Especially if you're on sewer and water and you're in town.
Yeah.
like-
Yeah, come on, I mean. So anyway, that's just my thought.
Alright.
All right, well, if we have nothing else. And without objection, do I have an objection? No objections? Meeting is adjourned 7:31.